working with customers around electrification products. To briefly introduce me, I'm particularly delighted to be on this stage today ahead of the Deputy Prime Minister. We both share a couple of things, and one of those is Guyanese heritage, where we are both descended from Windrush Guyanese, and we proudly represent the African diaspora as well. So absolutely delighted that two Guyanese get to end the day on a conference like this. What I would like to do is spotlight a particular island in Sierra Leone. Now, I think what I'm going to say is probably very familiar. I don't think I'm going to be telling an audience here anything new. This town in Sierra Leone is called Banff, and it's located on Sherbro Island. To bring kind of a perspective of where that is in the world, it's about as far as New York is from London. The main city of Sierra Leone, Freetown, if people know that, it's about 75 miles south, which is about a 6-hour car ride, and it's then about 2 hours by boat. What's interesting about this community is it's thriving. Fishing is the economic backbone. There are around 14,000 people that live in this village. However, Sierra Leone has electrification rates of about 28%, energy access rates. The island is just 5%. The source of its energy actually arrives intermittently by canoe and is diesel. This is a familiar picture across Africa, and I think is a window to something bigger. Currently, Africa accounts for around 85% of an electrified people, that figure globally across the world. This is something that is seen everywhere. And what we have to remember is that energy is productivity, it drives economies, and it's truly transformative. We can see that African economies suffer from not having access to energy, but also suffering from blackouts. If we look just over the last year, up to 6% of GDP was lost across African economies because of energy shortages. In Nigeria, for example, I think energy blackouts accounted for around a 25 billion loss. It's a really serious issue. We have to remember that every hour that people are living without power is an hour of output that's lost. It's lost income, and most importantly, it's lost growth for the economy. What has happened since the beginning of the year in March, when the Strait of Hormuz is closed, has meant that oil is surging, the price of oil is surging. It's almost doubled. Because these economies are so dependent, we are seeing a surge in energy prices. And even South Africa, which was more stable, I would say, in energy access compared to other places, is seeing real issues. And it's because it was needing to use diesel to help balance grids. And that's seen energy prices spike by as much as 67%. We see in East Africa the way that people are using transport, so electric motorbikes and motorbikes. The cost of fares has doubled. But if we look back to Sherbro Island in Sierra Leone, we can actually see that it has, unfortunately, those boats that are arriving by canoe with diesel, the prices have gone up 60%. And this is really serious because it means actually businesses aren't running in the way that they could. It means that people cannot take children to the clinics. It means that people can't go out to work. There is, however, a glimmer of hope here. And Africa has been seeing the most incredible innovation and surge in solar in particular. In terms of places across the world where solar can be produced, Africa has 60% of resources, which is absolutely incredible. Before this crisis, the continent was doing incredibly well in terms of harnessing this natural power. We've seen the cost of solar tumble, actually to the point of which solar is 40 times less than per kilowatt than diesel in certain circumstances. We've seen investment in the last 5 years go up fivefold, and we've seen energy prices in some places topple. it's really, really very important. It's a historic point where actually in 2025 we saw that solar reached an all-time low. It's now just about thinking the technology is there, however, we don't have the partners to bring together the ability to really unlock the catalytic effect that solar can have. I want to go back to Sierra Leone because I think it's an interesting example of how we can look to things like solar to be transformative to economies. But it very much depends on the lens that you choose to apply. Because I think a lot of criticism comes on renewables in the sense of the fact that people don't see that it's reliable. You know, it's intermittent. The sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. Actually, what we had done working with that community is sit back and think, how do we apply a systems lens? And it's this systems lens that I think is missing most of the time, where we're saying it's not just about investing in an infrastructure asset like solar, a solar farm, which is quite commonly understood, or wind. It's about saying, what's the connective tissue to be able to get those green electrons to a community? So it's about making sure that we have the grid, and it's making sure that actually we're designing the right types of installation for use. I was absolutely delighted to meet Sir Idris Elba once, and we started to talk about his passion for Sierra Leone, which was where his background was from. He's deeply rooted within Sherbro Island and bringing economic transformation. We also met in partnership with the government of Sierra Leone, who we weren't asking for really anything from them other than to open the market to wind energy, because wind farms, for example, are something that hadn't been built before. We wanted to bring solar, and that is something that I think is very well understood, but wind was something new. And they had the incredible innovative leadership to be able to create a policy environment whereby we could accelerate our investment into wind energy. What we've created at Sherbro is an installation that is 5 wind turbines. They are about the size of the Statue of Liberty, if you can imagine that, but not with the podium underneath, so from her toes to her crown. It's about 35 metres. There is also a solar installation, and most importantly, a battery. And it means that we can, on average, bring at least 94%. So good, it's not perfect, but 94% reliable energy. In the summer months, 100%. And this will be truly transformative. We're already seeing that on the island, people are planning new businesses. So one, first and foremost, will be cold storage for fishing. And this means actually that rather than having to sell fish at very low prices on the same day, they can be stored, refrigerated, and sold on to other markets, so creating new economies. There is the Bondwi Women's Association that is going to start an ice business. So this will be smaller scale freezers, which will go to food companies, not only on the island, but actually more widely. And this is the economic effect that cheaper green electrons can really, truly create. Renewables is so different from the fossil fuels that many African countries are dependent on currently. And this is because it directly puts power back in the hands of the people. It's so important because we see, looking at past history, the economies that have done the best in the world are driven by green power. We look at places like the growth of China and India, for example. We look at the rapid rates of electrification and EVs and storage and all of the abilities that these have to balance grids and really create a different system. And now is the time where we need to bring partners together, very much like with Sir Idris Elba's association, Elba Hope, which is a charitable organisation. The government's opening markets so that we can invest, and then investment coming in. What has been extraordinary is, as a result of this, we have seen so many innovative entrepreneurs on the continent, so many investable opportunities come to us as a result of this small project in Sherbro. And actually, we stood back and said, what we now need to be doing is designing a financial product that looks at the systems lens that enables true catalytic economies to be unlocked. So, last year at the G20, working together and in partnership with Global Citizen, Octopus Energy will be raising 450 million in institutional capital to invest in more projects like this, starting in Southern Africa and the opportunity that that represents. Because what we see from our lens is that the most secure electrons and the cheapest electrons that we can create are those which are close to home. And in Africa, a country that's abundant with solar and wind, we absolutely have to start there. Now, what I'm going to do is invite the co-founder of Global Citizen, who is Mick Sheldrick, to come and join me on the stage. Global Citizen was very much responsible for the Scaling Up Renewables in Africa campaign, which headlined at the G20. And we're going to discuss a little bit more about the Octopus story, but that also. So please join me, Mick. Thank you.
Well, let's give Zoisa another round of applause. She's incredible, and we're thrilled to have her on our board, which is really great. And the chair of our board is the one and only Sabrina Alba, together with Idris. You've heard a lot about this, and we've heard their motivations in Sierra Leone. But what I want to ask you, Zoisa, what is your motivations? And I don't mean just the Octopus motivation, because the affordability, the stats you showed is clear. This is the best way, electrification, to provide low-cost energy and scale energy access right across the continent. But what is also your personal motivations for being so vested in this agenda?
I would say energy, for me, is the most transformative power, and it's the easiest thing that we can possibly harness. And I don't think that we go to it enough, and particularly renewable energy. Looking at the opportunity that could be the African continent and working together with local partners, it's extraordinary. And I would say personally, coming from a family that very much proudly represents the African diaspora as well, looking at where my grandfather grew up in South America, energy was something that would have been transformative for his education. And he didn't have access to it. And wow. When I was growing up in my generation, education was the most important thing. It was incredibly important. And I think he used to say, look, if we had electricity, everything would have been different. Electricity isn't something that lights up just homes and industry. It can light up lives, and it can be truly transformative.
I was speaking to one of our partners a couple of nights ago, and they said one of the things that we often forget about is, when it comes to giving birth, deliveries, we forget that 50% of deliveries often take place in the night, at nighttime. And if you don't have access to electricity and you're giving birth in the dark, what's the impact of that? And so she showed me some compelling stats about the impact on deaths from complications in childbirth just through energy access. But you've also mentioned, and again, the presentation was incredible, compelling, why reliance on diesel is often not in the long-term business interests as well. And Octopus is a new generation of businesses who are meeting this need. We were speaking, I'm from Western Australia, and we were speaking about Fortescue as another example. And in the last 2 months, I feel like they've been saying, I told you so, this is why we need to electrify heavy industry as well. But why is it so important, especially at conferences like this, that businesses engage, and not just from an extractive point of view, but from a genuine point of view of building partnerships?
We see that business, of course, has the ability to be the most transformative thing for an economy, because it's the thing that will create more jobs. It creates then taxes that people are going to pay, and therefore you end up with true economies. Businesses also have the ability very often to design their own energy needs, be truly transformative to communities. So looking at the way that grids are built or renewables are built, very often have the knock-on effect of also bringing electricity to disparate communities, which can be, of course, hugely important as well. The way that we build wind and solar in particular, of course, they are truly decentralized from a system. You can build them in such a way as well, where you need very small grid lines. You've got the cheapest forms of energy at one end. If you have a battery also to store, I was talking about the example in Sierra Leone where you can get solid power for 94% of the time. In some parts of Africa, it could be as high as 98% of the time. So really, really close to perfect in the sense of the way renewables are built. And it would be the cheapest cost. So in some places, this can be as little as about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Super, super cheap. I think too often, though, and particularly in investment, when we look to those systems, we sacrifice good for perfect. And we're kind of saying, oh, well, renewables doesn't give us 100% of the time. Actually, 98% of the time is pretty good. Most digital services, so if you're watching Netflix and it goes a bit blocky, you put up with it. That's 98% of the time as well. So I think renewables very often is overlooked. I think actually businesses can play a really catalytic role in driving the way that systems use energy.
So very briefly, because I know we're expecting an address from the Deputy Prime Minister, so stick around for that. But you mentioned the Scaling Up Renewable in Africa campaign. And again, Zoisa, Octopus, they were part of a coalition of 9 businesses that pledged to provide 17.5 million people with access to energy over the next 5 years. But very briefly, to finish us up, we're at this, chaotic, fragmented moment in history. But what is your hope on where we can get to over the next 12 months? What does that look like for you?
I would say that the incredible thing that the Scaling Up in Renewables in Africa campaign did was bring together people. It was bring together a collective of people that were thinking the same way. We were the only British business. I think there were many African businesses.
Let's give them a round of applause for that, for standing up, because that is extraordinary.
But there were many, many businesses from the continent that also came forwards with incredible examples, but also investment too. And I think actually that confidence of bringing together the coalition of the willing, and I think that's such a great phrase, to make things happen. Is so important. So I would say more coalitions across many different forms and backgrounds. So whether or not that's the private sector, with philanthropy, with aid, with absolutely everything. But applying in this particular sector in energy a lens that is looking at the full system. It's not just over-indexing on saying let's build wind and solar with little thought to the people that might be using it at the other end.
Wow. Well, look, coalition of the willing indeed. Thank you to Octopus. Thank you to those 8 other African businesses. Thank you to the government of South Africa, the UK government, for showing us that even in this chaotic, fragmented world, cooperation is still possible. We can still bring people together. Please join me in giving wonderful applause to the great Zoisa Northbond.
And also, Vice President, thank you.
Thank you both so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to show you a very short video while we prepare the stage. So please bear with us. Back in a moment.
Hello, I'm Ndidi. Now, what's in for 2026? Fair financing and local storytellers. In the case of the amazing continent Africa, this is especially relevant because we desperately need to tell positive stories about the great news from our continent, not only in terms of
consistent and outspoken champion, both as Foreign Secretary and in his current role, of exactly what this afternoon has been about: shifting power to countries and communities so that they can lead their own development. To close our two Shifting the Power plenaries, please welcome the Deputy Prime Minister, the Right Honourable David Lammy.
Well, first, let me thank the fantastic panelists that we've just heard speak so powerfully over the past few hours on this important issue, shifting the power. Whether on the border of Sudan as Foreign Secretary, visiting Sri Lanka as Deputy Prime Minister, or welcoming Global South leaders to the UK from across the world, what's clear is that the 1997 style approach to international development no longer works. Global South partners feel the overlapping crises that we're seeing across the world, the shocks and the creaking of the system. The hardest, of course, we are living through essentially a great remaking. In a changing international order, many powers are shaping this, the multipolar age. And so our status quo is clearly not fit for purpose. We're changing our approach, moving from the paternalism of the past to the partnerships of the future, and championing the reforms required across the system, making it fairer, more impactful, and unblocking the finance needed to turbocharge development and climate action. It's fantastic to see that under my dear colleague, Yvette Cooper, and the wonderful Baroness Chapman, this work has only grown in importance, and frankly, looking at us all here today is a testament to that. But as we've just heard, there is more, much more, we must do together. As an international community, too often we failed in our primary task to work in genuine partnership, not focused on handouts, but on shared growth. We know that when those most greatly affected shape the solutions, decisions carrying greater legitimacy, outcomes endure, and our collective impact is stronger. As the Foreign Secretary outlined earlier, we have a responsibility to make this right, but also an interest in doing so. As Deputy Prime Minister, I know all too well that growth, tackling the climate crisis, and the health of our citizens cannot be separated from international shocks and crises. Because as we've seen all too clearly in recent years, instabilities and crises across the world have a direct impact on us here at home. From the effects of COVID-19, which continue, of course, to reverberate, to the floods and the extreme weather and damage our towns and cities, all of it costing billions of pounds, to the impacts of global economic shocks on the cost of living. If we are to shift course, we must see a genuine shift in approach and a genuine shift in power. We've heard loud and clear over these two plenary sessions a rallying cry for a central organising principle that countries and communities own aspirations, plans and priorities must be at the heart of development cooperation. And what are the three key things that we've heard that we can collectively do to turn this principle into practice? Well, first, we must work alongside partners as they set their own agendas, aligning our support and finance behind their aspirations for their own development. It means coordinating behind country platforms where the countries choose them to align support with national priorities. It means co-creating, co-designing, co-deciding solutions as best and standard practice where partners determine what, where and how development resources are used. And that's why the UK wholeheartedly endorses the call to action to all development actors to accelerate support for locally led development, and we encourage you to join us. Second, that we need to take a whole society approach, from government to the private sector to philanthropy to civil society, including the most marginalised voices, to support the changes that countries and communities want to see. This government has always believed in a feminist approach to international development and foreign policy, women and girls in all their diversity, and women's rights organisations as drivers of change and progress, essential to growth, peace and stability. That's why I commend the work of Yvette Cooper. With her leadership, the UK has made this a standalone foreign policy priority. And finally, to deliver this, we must support partners in building self-sufficiency and fiscal resilience. We need to redouble our efforts to ensure countries can mobilise their own finance, spend well, borrow responsibly and manage shocks effectively to build sustainable economies. Control over finances is control over sovereignty, and this means tackling illicit finance and corruption, which I see as one of the great progressive causes of our times. Illicit financial flows are estimated to total between $800 billion and $2 trillion every year. That's around 2 to 5% of global GDP. This is money that should be in the hands of citizens, ordinary people, supporting their public services. Instead, it lines the pockets of kleptocrats, their cronies, and funds their luxury homes in capitals like this one, here in London. Together, we must move beyond an agenda simply focused on transparency and end the era of impunity for those exploiting developing nations for their own ill-gotten gains. It also means mobilising more private capital, and the City of London is a hub of green finance, and we want to become a hub of global development finance too. So we're working with senior leaders from across the investment community to address practical barriers to scaling investment in developing countries. And this, to me, exemplifies a move towards building genuine new partnerships, new coalitions that deliver growth and opportunity for citizens here and abroad. But none of this will be enough if we don't also work together to change the global development system. You will have heard from many leaders and those championing reform initiatives over the course of today, and it's clear that there are already some key areas of momentum. First, that we must address the injustice at the heart of the system for ensuring a global South voice that's representative and has influence and a meaningful seat at the table. Again, Yvette Cooper set out earlier today how the UK is working in partnership to champion the shift across the system, whether that's ensuring greater voice across the debt architecture through the new borrowers platform, co-chairing the current World Bank shareholding review, reforming the United Nations Security Council to include permanent representation for the continent of Africa, for India, for Germany, Brazil, and Japan, or ensuring the OECD debt reform review keeps pace with the scale of the changes to the development partnership and finance landscape. We are proud, then, to play our part. Second, it's clear that institutions and actors must work better as a system to get behind the aspirations of countries and communities. Working together should be the starting point, systemic and not ad hoc. That means going further and faster on essential reforms to support genuine collaboration between development banks, climate funds, and other institutions, bringing together finance, expertise, and implementation at scale. And third, we must prioritise and protect the parts of the system that protect us. There is no development without climate action, and no climate action without development. These are two sides of the same coin. At all levels of government, the United Kingdom remains relentlessly focused on addressing the defining global challenge. The transition to a resilient, nature-positive, clean-powered global economy is the growth opportunity of the 21st century. We will not succeed in tackling the climate and nature crisis or deliver resilient, sustainable growth without reforming the full development and climate ecosystem. We need a climate and nature finance architecture that works faster, smarter, and more effectively. And we need to mobilise more finance from all sources whilst delivering a step change in access to ensure funding reaches the poorest and the most vulnerable. And we need to ensure that funding reaches communities on the ground and that marginalised groups are at the centre of decision making. This is proven to deliver stronger, more effective resilience. It needs to be the core in shifting the power. And that's why we've always supported the vision of least development countries to get more finance and decision-making power flowing to locally led climate action and to communities on the front line. Finally, that we must look ahead to the system we need for the future and define that future together. We as politicians, as leaders, must take greater responsibility to set out a common vision, to re-inspire hope that we can tackle the collective challenges that we face for the betterment of my citizens and of yours. And as we've heard today, there is much more to do on this agenda to deliver that paradigm shift. But we are committed as partners, as reformers, to stay the course. And what do we know? We know that relationships grounded in old hierarchies no longer work, and instead we need to base our relationships on mutual respect as equals. So how do we get there? We know there's more to do, but when I look around this room, I see people, governments and organisations that are committed to do the work to realise our ambitions. We're not all the same, of course. We don't agree on everything, but together we can build new coalitions which give us a seat at the table, all of us. And we must take the discussions of this week and turn them into concrete actions. It's about restoring confidence that cooperation can deliver, and this is what shifting the power means in practice: more trust, more legitimacy, more impact. I'm so pleased that this global partnership and this gathering has come together and that you're all here today. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, as I listened to the conversations today, I kept thinking back to Anne Aiden's poem. She spoke of the fragility of the now and choose humanity. We all have a shared conviction that something has to change.